Yesterday I did a video on the topic of string theory and how there are 10 or more dimensions. And I actually went through all the mathematics and the various types of string theory and Bosnick theories, and I noticed something very interesting. I noticed a lot of what is being propagated in the public eye as so-called science is nothing more than philosophy and a cover-up for what's really going on. Okay, for example, we have Lego dimensions here, right? And you can see how they're basically propagandizing children with the concept of there being other portals. And they don't exactly lie about these portals within Hollywood and the music industry and the gaming industry and just children's toys. Something bad could come from this portal is kind of the concept that they often show. You have this Avengers movie portal and some evil things came through and they happen to be bigger than humans, sort of echoing back to the Nephilim, right? And then you have the Transformers movie portal, the same exact type of thing over and over and over. With Transformers, it was to an alternate dimension as well. Avengers, Legos, you got Terminator going back in time, and you have a portal back in time, and you have all these movies and the music industry and just everything within our society talking about dimensions and portals. And I noticed when I looked through just the pure mathematics of string theory and why there has to be more than one dimension. Just briefly, I want to cover that for a second so I can show you what's really going on here. Okay, with string theory, you actually have two different veins. You had Bosnick theory, which was 26 dimensions, and string theory, which is 10 or more dimensions. And the whole idea is they're trying to unite into a single theory to explain everything: particle physics and quantum mechanics, because they can't connect the two without there being more than one dimension on a mathematical model scale. So we already know that there's more than one dimension as a result. We have, length, width, height, which are 3 dimensions, spatial dimensions, and you have time, which is a 4th dimension, sort of a dimension, and some people argue whether that's a dimension or not. It doesn't matter. And then there's 6 more dimensions at least for there to be a way to harmonize all these scientific theories. Now, that's just sort of the summation of the whole thing. They don't actually know what these other 10 dimensions are, not even remotely. I mean 10, I mean 6. They don't know what these 6 other dimensions are, other than they know they're spatial. That's all they know. They're spatial.
A few months back, Anthony Patch was on Face Like the Sun talking about Mandela portals, this new D-Wave quantum computer that's being sold now, and how this man named Geordie Rose said it was like an altar to an alien god, the computer he's referring to, that he created. Essentially what's going on is they're trying to find a way to observe subatomic particles without observing them, because what's going on is when you observe a subatomic particle, you're actually causing a creation point. And what I mean by that is when you look at something, it causes that subatomic particle to take a state. Before you look at it, it's actually multiple states at once.
We fired electrons, tiny bits of matter through. But we get a pattern like waves, not like little marbles. How? How could pieces of matter create an interference pattern like a wave? It doesn't make sense. But physicists are clever. They thought, maybe those little balls are bouncing off each other and creating that pattern. So, they decide to shoot electrons through one at a time. There is no way they could interfere with each other. But after an hour of this, the same interference pattern is seen to emerge. The conclusion is inescapable. The single electron leaves as a particle, becomes a wave of potentials, goes through both slits, and interferes with itself to hit the wall like a particle. But mathematically, it's even stranger. It goes through both slits and it goes through neither. and it goes through just one, and it goes through just the other. All of these possibilities are in superposition with each other. But physicists were completely baffled by this. So they decided to peek and see which slit it actually goes through. They put a measuring device by one slit to see which one it went through and let it fly. But the quantum world is far more mysterious than they could have imagined. When they observed, the electron went back to behaving like a little marble. It produced a pattern of two bands, not an interference pattern of many. The very act of measuring or observing which slit it went through meant it only went through one, not both. The electron decided to act differently, as though it was aware it was being watched. And it was here that physicists stepped forever into the strange netherworld of quantum events. What is matter? Marbles or waves? And waves of what? And what does an observer have to do with any of this? The observer collapsed the wave function simply by observing.
These other dimensions fold in on themselves, although they're spatial dimensions. Now, we can't observe them because it's on such a microscopic level. But with this whole knowing that these subatomic particles are multiple states at once until you observe it, we know that, like for example, if you have two electrons that are connected on an atomic level to an atom, and you somehow split those electrons apart from one another, from this atom, and separate them, even 1,000 light years, these two electrons will still behave as if they're connected. Okay? So there's a lot of weird stuff going on that they can't understand. And of course, what it essentially tells us is that our reality is not exactly what we think it is. It's not concrete. It's not real. Okay? When we observe something, it creates it. It's kind of like a video game. And when you're playing a video game, before you make a decision, there's a lot of variables that could happen within the programming. But once you make the decision, it reacts and it gives you what you need. Okay? Whatever three-dimensional thing you end up seeing, or whatever thing you interact with in the game. It's the same with our reality. A subatomic particle can be multiple states at one time until you observe it. When you observe it, it becomes one state. So that tells you, in a sense, we are in some sort of program. I mean, in a sense, that, you know, what we see as our reality is actually not the entirety of reality. And that these other dimensions that we can't observe, according to quantum mechanics, string theory, exist and are real. I mean, they're building computers based off this understanding. And the whole idea is, like I said, once you observe it, it falls apart. You can't see the multiple states. These computers are based on the concept of there being multiple states and somehow being able to indirectly analyze it and get sort of an amplitude, sort of like a graph of what's going on. So like you put in some variables, you want to get the results in this multi-level result, but you can't get it if you directly observe it, right? So instead you have these, they've come up with these formulas on how to, in a sense, get an amplitude of what's going on with the results when you put it into the computer. So it's kind of like you get sort of a picture instead of an exact result. This is exactly what this, you know, multiple states are. They get sort of like a dim picture. And these dimensions are here with us. We just can't observe them. In a sense, the spiritual dimension is how you would say it religiously. You know, of course, a lot of people don't believe in the spiritual, right? You know, but this actually proves there are other dimensions, and this, in a sense, ties into the whole concept of the spiritual dimension. You know, what are these other spatial dimensions we can't observe that they're somehow making a graph of? And the reason why these computers are so much faster than standard computers, like I said, standard computers binary. You only can do so much with binary. And when you look at a set of like if you set a set of numbers, you have to do so many processes to figure out something. With a multiple dimension type of design, you actually can get a lot more done quicker. I don't want to have to go through all the math with it. I actually went through and looked at it all. Here we go. Here's some of it right here. It's this type of math here. As an engineer, I'm not. This stuff doesn't surprise me at all. You got all this weird stuff you learn when you're an engineer. But this is just yet another type of theoretical mathematics, quantum mathematics, and I understand what's going on. It's not rocket science. Well, I mean, maybe it is in a sense rocket science, but it just reminds me of calculus, and just on a different level. You know what I mean? You know, altars to an alien god. It sort of shows you how they know they're actually tapping into the spiritual realm to get these calculations, even though they're looking at a subatomic level. Now, you know, with the concept of CERN, of course, they're just crashing particles together to see what the results are and to understand sort of these other dimensions. Now, is there more to it than all this? Of course, it could be a lot more to it than all this. We'd be only speculating. It is curious, he says, altars to an alien god. It makes you really wonder what else they're also doing, and what maybe they've more understanding that they're not letting us know about regarding this quantum computing. And I guess you could say also with CERN the same kind of thing. You know, with CERN, they're understanding other dimensions. Now, if they're starting to understand other dimensions, they're understanding how they work. Eventually, maybe they could sort of make a bridge between these two dimensions, from the spiritual to the physical. And that's kind of what a lot of these guys who are doing research on this are thinking. And I actually agree with that, but I think it gets hyped up sometimes a little too much. I think there's a lot of stuff they're not telling us about that they've already figured out. But you know, it's all up to speculation with a lot of people on this type of stuff. But I just wanted to kind of cover sort of, you know, what is this quantum computing? Because when I was reading some of these guys' work, they were talking as if they're literally opening up dimensions, like portals to some other universe or something, micro portals or something. I don't think that's an accurate way to say it. The dimensions are already there. They're just finding ways to observe those dimensions. Now, yeah, with CERN, I guess you could say in a sense they're kind of trying to crash these subatomic particles together. In a sense, you could say they are opening, you know, maybe messing with stuff a little bit in that respect. So I think with CERN you could say that much more so than you could with these quantum computers. These quantum computers are learning how to observe these other dimensions, and maybe they've learned a lot of stuff we don't know about, and maybe that's what, you know, this altars to an alien god. It makes you kind of wonder if they understand that they're actually observing the spiritual dimension when they're doing this type of stuff. And of course, you're observing an atom in a spiritual dimension. I mean, it's not like you're observing Lucifer or something in a spiritual dimension. But then again, we don't know what they're doing on the side. You know what I mean? We don't know any of that kind of stuff. But maybe a lot of these guys are occultists and all that kind of stuff. That's just kind of my whole thought on this whole thing. As from a mechanical engineer standpoint, it is very curious how they talk about portals. Also, when I did searches, this was really kind of creepy. When I did searches on, it's just like it was like D-Wave. I was just trying to understand a few things. I think I typed in portals, and it was really interesting how they used the word portal all the time to refer to web portals, like as if people ever use that word. I mean, that's like such an archaic word to use. But I noticed I did other searches too, and you see, and I'm not even talking about this. Let's see, I'm trying to see some of the stuff I was seeing before. Okay, careers, web portal, right there, web portal. Nobody uses that word anymore, web portal. And of course, this is the stuff we were talking about, this research from Anthony Patch. But I mean, look down here, community portal, portal quantum computing, portal. And I saw some other ones. I did some other searches with the word portal. And it just seemed really weird how they like to, you know how they like to throw stuff in your face, right? Okay, I remember now. This is pretty crazy. I was actually listening to this Anthony Patch thing when I did this. I just typed in D-Wave, and exactly when he said the word portal, I read this word portal. And this is on D-Wave's website. The very first word on their web description is the word portal. I'm like, okay, are you trying to give us something away here? No, portal? Nobody says portal. Nobody says, okay, nobody says web portal anymore. That's just so freaking archaic. Clearly, it almost gives the impression like they're trying to say something, and it's the very first word. And right when I'm listening to this Anthony Patch say the word portal, I read this the exact same second, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of weird. and then I started noticing the word portal everywhere whenever it had anything to do with this D-Wave computer. I'm like, and all these different websites on quantum computing always have the word portal, web portal, this portal, that portal. And I'm thinking, okay, well, I don't think that, you know, this computer specifically opens portals, but if these guys are occultists and are working together with CERN, perhaps they're helping CERN know how to, in a sense, read what they see in these multi-dimensional states. So these guys are, in a sense, you know, it's multiple teams working together trying to understand how to observe the unobservable. Maybe that's their end goal, you know, with CERN. I don't know if they could do it with these computers because, like I said, I think they're just merely observing these other dimensions. They found a way to indirectly observe these other dimensions, and it's sort of like a dim picture, not exact, you know, science in a sense. Using these theoretical models I showed you with the numbers there, this type of math actually helps them to understand and make a picture of what's going on, and it helps them to calculate much faster what's being put into the computer and spit out. And it has to do with, like, in a sense, it's sort of like a wave property, waves that cancel out each other, waves that amplify each other. So it comes down to looking at waves that cancel each other out and waves that amplify each other. That's what basically the math comes down to. When it comes to this D-Wave computer. So it's all about observations with this D-Wave computer, assuming what they tell us is what it's all doing. You know, we don't know if there's more to this that they're not telling us about. But it seems to be more of an observation type thing. And the reason why they put it at almost absolute zero and all that stuff, actually I had a picture of why they did that. I don't know if I closed it already. I think it was here. The reason why they put it at absolute zero and all that is because then there's less, and they also take away the magnetic field interference. So they get rid of the magnetic field interference and they put it at absolute zero so that they can get a more pure result that they can quantify from analyzing the subatomic particles. And in that way, they can get a better readout when they're trying to make sort of a picture of the results. That's why it runs that way. But the whole thing about, is there more to them? Is it more than them just observing these other dimensions? I don't know. But with CERN, it's very clear it's not just observing these other dimensions. It's also causing, in a sense, rifts when they do these subatomic particle collisions. So, you know, with CERN, I can see that far more so being science towards portals than this whole computer thing, this D-Wave computer. Maybe I'm missing something. I mean, they're not going to tell us, obviously, flat out, but this is just how I see it. Maybe the D-Wave computers, though, are helping them to understand and observe these other dimensions, and that, in a sense, leads to eventually getting these portals, you know what I mean? These portals that seemingly they seem to talk about a lot with CERN, and they also seem to talk about a little bit with these computers. Maybe they're working together in that respect. If you can somehow indirectly observe the unobservable and perfect this to where you can actually observe it, You know, it's just kind of like a tricky thing, right? It's like having money when you don't have money, right? They've already come up with these various formulas, which I actually didn't cover because it's just a lot of math, and you know, I'm pretty sure I'll lose a lot of people's attention if I try to go through all this and explain it. I explain on a very basic level a few things on this, but the whole thing is that if these guys are helping to learn how to observe these multiple dimensions, and if they can, you know, all work together and finally perfect it, and if CERN is doing something with these collisions, and then if they're able to observe things and maybe take it onto a more macroscopic level, perhaps they could see into the spiritual realm, and perhaps even work with the spiritual realm in some respect. I don't know. But I don't think that these computers themselves directly do anything of that sort. I don't think they do it even on a microscopic level. I think they merely are observing subatomic particles in multiple dimensions. And that's how they're reading their results. Whether or not they're doing extra stuff in the background we're not aware of, which they're not telling us about, of course, that's completely different. Now, they also talked about in this video about Mandela effects. How is it? Does this have anything to do with the Mandela effect? You know, and I'm still curious about that topic. I talked about it a few times. I've went actually back and forth on it. I don't think the Bible's been changed, but there are a lot of things that are very strange. Matter of fact, there was just one the other day. I could swear Betty White was dead, and apparently she's not dead. Okay, she was on Fox News. No, she wasn't on Fox News. She was on something with, it was like CNN or something. She was on something, and I thought she was already dead. I thought she died a few years back or something. I really did think, I could swear she died a few years back. Apparently she's still alive and ticking, you know. Okay. Another Mandela effect, or just my brain doesn't work. I don't know which one it is. You know, is it cognitive dissonance? Is it me just thinking something is there when it's not there? You know, like the narwhal. I could swear if the narwhal existed, I should have learned about that when I was a kid. I'm pretty sure I would have remembered some sort of sea animal with a unicorn horn on it. But apparently I missed that one when I was growing up because I didn't even know about it until about a year ago. So, yeah, I know. There's just a lot of weird stuff like that that I can't explain. Some of it could just be people remembering stuff incorrectly, or maybe commercials that redid stuff wrongly. And there was some really weird stuff I noticed when I was researching Mandela, like where I would see the original would have it the other way, the way that they claim it is, and then I would see like interviews of the people that were in the movie where they would say it the opposite way. And it's just like, what? Was that on purpose? Was that a psyop in and of itself? You know, like certain movies where they would mispronounce the name of the movie when they would do interviews, but if you go look at the original movie, it was right. And then like even Forrest Gump, where they do like a take in a sort of a movie review where they would show him saying it the way everybody remembered, but then when you went and watched the movie, it was the other way. I don't know. It's really strange stuff. But, I mean, does that have anything to do with this stuff? Does it have to do with quantum computing or CERN? I don't think it would have anything to do with quantum computing, at least from what they've explained and how it works. Could it have something to do with CERN? Yeah, maybe, or something like CERN, because they are actually crashing together these subatomic particles, and perhaps it's doing something when they do that. I don't know. It's curious. It is very strange. You know, the Mandela effect, you have to ask yourself if it's cognitive dissonance or if it's actually something really changing or what's going on there. I don't know exactly. Still an enigma to me. This guy was talking about it being quantum pollution, as if, you know, them doing all this stuff in the quantum realm. I don't think with the computers, because they're just observing the quantum realm in an indirect manner. But maybe with CERN, they are doing something. And of course, then there's also the fact that allegedly Anthony Patch has been visited by the government a couple times after doing a few of these meetings where he's talking about CERN. Or maybe he's onto something. I don't know about all that either, but there's a lot of crazy stuff going on with this, you know. Maybe there is some, and I'm actually making a video game right now where we're going to actually have some stuff about, not CERN, but something of a Hadron Collider on a mysterious island, and you're playing on this mysterious island. I'm not going to explain it all. It's going to be a really awesome game. I'm going to do a Kickstarter for it, and we'll have like a live YouTube event where we're going to cover it all and get support, because it actually needs to have monetary support so we can finish the game. Right now I'm actually paying the programmer out of pocket. But I just wanted to kind of talk about this a little bit, say my 2 cents worth. You know, there's a lot of people who have talked about this, but I think sometimes there's a lot of hype that can get into this. You know, I want to try to keep it more grounded with what we can understand, and just speculate on what would probably actually happen or work or potentially be feasible with these things. So I don't think these quantum computers have anything to do with all this strange stuff with the Mandela effect or any of that. I do think CERN potentially could. I don't know. It's hard to say. You know, it's a lot of speculation there. I should probably get into CERN more one of these. I was mainly hitting on this quantum computers, though. I wanted to kind of explain how they worked and such. But at any rate, thanks for watching.